Stephen Hawking, astrophysicist and arguably one of the smartest people on the planet, warned us about the possibility of aliens from outer space.
Hawking says that if extraterrestrials visit us, the outcome might be similar to when Columbus landed in America. In other words, it didn't turn out too well for Native Americans.
Once you look, it grabs hold.
Well, the news related to aliens has increased like never before. Some might be lies, but each truth and lies are pointing to the fact that somebody wants us to believe in them. Why is that? Are we looking at a false flag invasion? Scare tactics to control the people? Project Bluebeam, New World Order conspiracy? Or are there really aliens out there about to make an arrival? It seems endless right now in all the news that we see. We've got the Goldilocks planet capable of holding life near Earth, a new Earth. We have the Disclosure Conference that just came out, the UN nukes and UFOs seeking the anti-universe, Vatican holding an ET conference, Reverend Funes talking about baptizing ETs, and the Rothschilds gather with NASA to discuss life in the cosmos. Oh, and watch your carbon footprint or you might explode. 1010 coming up tomorrow. All kinds of interesting things going on planet Earth right now. And amazingly, right along with the agenda that we feel is unfolding in some sort of New World Order script, an occult extraterrestrial agenda that is being played out on the masses. Now, what are we to think when we start to see the barrage of all these news reports? Aliens attacking our nuclear programs, conferences, UN meetings, Royal Society gatherings to talk about extraterrestrial life. We add this to all the previous stuff where we had, well, Hillary Clinton acknowledging the galactic government. We have Hillary Clinton showing up with Lawrence Rockefeller with the book, Are We Alone by Paul Davies. We have Buzz Aldrin coming out on all of these different shows talking about monoliths on the moon of Mars. Meanwhile, NASA's discussing their 2013 trip to Mars, while SpaceX's Elon Musk wants to retire on Mars. And pretty soon, the chief of NASA will be meeting with the Chinese on interrelationships into space travel. We have a lot going on planet Earth and a lot of questions to answer. My God, it seems that we have entered this space and time where, well, I knew it would happen. The real world caught up with the Freeman perspective. We're in the place now where I had led myself to believe we would be, and yet everything is different than I had anticipated. It all seems like a show to me, a charade, a falsity, none of which I can believe, none of which I can follow. And yet I've been guided through this extraterrestrial realm with my own personal experiences from childhood on up into my adulthood. I've seen UFOs. I've seen massive V-shaped craft. And amazingly, at that point, I did not think it was extraterrestrial. But yet we have the governor of Arizona, Fife Symington, ex-governor now, saying that if you had seen that V-shaped craft, you would have known it was otherworldly. I had quite the opposite reaction. What's going on right now? We're going to cover a lot of details today, get to this extraterrestrial hypothesis, and see where it leads us. Will aliens arrive on 10/13? Well, it's been 1 year since we bombed the moon. Do you remember this $79 million dud, the Lacrosse, that was impacted into the moon? And what came of this? Was it remembered? Was it thought about? I think about the fact that we were tracking CERN so heavily. We were tracking the bombing of the moon so heavily. And yet, when it came down to the fruition of this of these operations, we find nothing. There's nothing coming from either side. We find some anomalous things within our particle universe from CERN, and they got a new mural just recently. But what about bombing the moon? Where's the data? Where's the purpose? What was that money wasted for? Especially when we already knew that the Chandrayaan-1 had been up there, discovered water. We knew that the Kaguya of the Japanese probe had already crashed into the moon. And then here's America crashing their rocket straight into the moon. What was the purpose? Well, what if life on planet Earth is so far beyond what we actually think has been going on while we exist in a zoo mentality and an extraterrestrial reality has been existing around us all along? This is a question that needs to be asked as we start to discover new things in the universe, start to realize that there is absolute potential for life in the universe. One of the lead stories coming out right now is the Goldilocks planet. They found a planet that was an Earth-like planet, discovered after more than a decade of observations using the Keck Observatory in Hawaii. The astronomers say that this is a potentially habitable planet and is one that could sustain life. Although they have not determined whether there are oceans on board, it seems that it's in perfect zone to have such. This planet orbits a dwarf star they call Geis 581, and the planet itself, Geis 581G. Saying that this is a Goldilocks planet, one that is just a find that opens the potential that there would be many other planets habitable in our galaxy and galaxies beyond. That life actually would be the norm. Now, you probably wouldn't want to live on Geis 581G because, well, it's tidal locked, and so you either have all daylight or all night. And also the pressures there, being that it's about 3 times the size of planet Earth, actually would make it very hard to get up. They say you wouldn't exactly become a puddle, but you wouldn't really enjoy your time there either. But perhaps they need to throw a moon in around this planet and cause it to start to orbit, to rotate, as perhaps things have happened on planet Earth in this way. What do we think about life in the universe? What do we think about the idea of extraterrestrials visiting planet Earth? And what would be a potential conspiracy theory to go along with an alien arrival? Now, we've just had the fourth kind. We've had V come out, and then recently the Event. They're really pushing this extraterrestrial connection and then really pushing fear to come with it. certainly in The Fourth Kind, they brought in the whole Sumerian connection. They brought in the owl of Bohemian Grove or even esoteric arts. And they made you believe this was real. Many people left The Fourth Kind thinking that it was based on a real story. Most didn't wait till the credits to see that they were showing the actors and actresses playing these roles, but taking away the idea that this had actually happened and the idea of possession by extraterrestrials. So we see this being proposed and brought forth through most of the sci-fi genre that we have on extraterrestrials. Isn't it funny if you're an SG-1 fan, if you're into watching Stargate, and we realize that every other planet in the civilization, other than all speaking English, but every other planet that they visit, they all know there's ETs. They all know they're aliens. And they're like, yes, we come from planet Earth. And yet none of the Earthlings are aware of aliens whatsoever. Now, you might notice if you get to the end of the credits on SG-1 that it's in connection with the Department of Defense. That this whole operation of SG-1, the movie, the film, the TV show, is all sponsored by the Department of Defense. Although the show itself comes from Canada. And when we start to see that they're programming this idea of infestation in a way of aliens. So the aliens actually are a parasite. They are a reptilian sort of snake-type being that are put into human hosts. Now, this is pretty similar to Chris Carter's Alien from the X-Files. And isn't it curious that Chris Carter's production company would be 1013? And in that same storyline, as we get to the end of the X-Files, the aliens are some sort of oil-type being that infest your body, take it over, and grow an alien inside of you. We could see this in the same similar setup with Disney and their Kane Chronicles and the hosting of God forms inside of children. This seems to be a common theme. Now, our alien story has gone through numerous themes. When we got the first alien contacts, back in the early days of alien contact, all the aliens were from Venus, and they were trying to tell humanity to save planet Earth, but there was no time left. This progressed into the abduction scenario. So around the 1940s, we have new radar technologies going into play, and suddenly UFOs crashing out of the sky. Most of those connected with this tend to believe that the radar were the cause of the malfunctions within the flying saucers, which then were supposedly captured. Now, I don't know if you went and watched the disclosure conference that was just put out by the National Press Conference. How many of these have I watched? Lots. Honestly, I think I've read nearly every UFO abduction type book, Blue Book, any of the experiencers, and I've watched an amazing amount of hours of whistleblowing testimony. It's boring. It is so boring, right? You sit there and you listen to these guys, and they're ex-military, they're FFA officials, they're pilots, they're engineers, they're police officers, and they're telling you about craft that took off at 2,000 miles an hour, hovered, went around, left, nothing too much, lights in the sky. Tales of abductions. We have confirmed tales of abductions where a police officer outside of a building witnesses a UFO approaching a many-storied apartment building and removing a lady from inside who had also reported the incident herself. We find that there are millions of abduction stories, millions of people believing that they have been taken by aliens and been tested upon. Now, when we look at this synopsis, this scenario, as we try to understand now, if we have millions of people being abducted regularly, and the belief is that they are taken through familial lines, so if you take generations of families up into these craft, and we believe that all of these cattle mutilations are real. Thousands, tens of thousands of cattle mutilated with cauterized incisions on their body that show no signs of blood seepage. Interesting parts of the body taken. Best for genetic study. We know that bovine cellular structure is so similar to man's that it can be tested and get positive results for humans. What would this be all about? Why would an extraterrestrial race, a race that was from many light years away, be abducting all of these people and all of the cattle, not to mention a few goats and whatnot? Now, is it possible that this would be the case for a race that was coming to visit planet Earth, or would this be a case of a race that maybe existed on planet Earth? Could it be that some of the aliens that we think are actually extraterrestrial are subterrestrial? Perhaps even submariner. Certainly, most of the first UFO encounters were by the Navy of UFO craft coming up out of the ocean, or what they called USOs. We have lots of tales of aliens in connection with water, and even the Amazon is one of the main hotspots for extraterrestrial or UFO activity. But are they extraterrestrial? That's the question. When we start looking around and we find the Nazis are building UFOs as well, then we have the man-made hypothesis. We have a lot to sort out when it comes to these stories. And when what we get for our disclosure are these pilots, these officials telling us their tales of craft that have come and gone, with no real tales of the inhabitants of these crafts, no real stories, although they do come. They do talk of captured EBEs and their inevitable death in our cages. We do talk of connections with Eisenhower and his mysterious toothache when he was flown perhaps to another military base to meet with the extraterrestrials, to make a contract with them about the abductions of human race. And when we look to the Greys, we definitely see what appears to be more of a demonic type scenario. And this would bring us back to the fourth kind. This idea of possession by aliens. I cannot believe that if aliens were here and were visiting from some distant star, that they would need to abduct as many people and cows as has been going on for the last 50 years. And yet I believe that this is going on because the abundance of evidence to suggest so. Now, most of these men have been held at a 50-year contract before they could release their data. Some data will never be released. But it's time now for them to start to release that data. And so in this bent, the UN has announced an ambassador for ETs. And yet you find that they're already backtracking on this. This is when Othman was given this job, a 58-year-old Malaysian astrophysicist, Mazlan Othman, head of the UN's Office for Outer Space Affairs, which is charged with promoting international cooperation in the peaceful uses of outer space. Now, as they announced that Miss Othman was going to become this ET ambassador, she quickly backtracked and started to say, no, thank you for the honor, but I need to turn this down. Now, she led Malaysia's National Space Agency before heading to the UN and helped train the country's first astronaut. And she's scheduled next week to be speaking at the Royal Society event, where in this she announced that she would not be the one to greet E.T. when he arrived, but yet would be there to discuss near-Earth objects. So now we're back to our SS officer, Werner von Braun. So here she is going to meet with the Royal Society on the idea that she's coming to deal with near-Earth objects, and yet the very meeting that she's going to is dealing with extraterrestrial contact. looking for the full disclosure on this. Sometimes all of my posts. And if you want to follow along and keep up with these news stories, go over to freemantv.com and check out the Space War News. You'll find it up in the top right-hand corner. Or over at thefreemanperspective.blogspot.com, where you'll find it just on the right-hand side. So I was looking for a bit more into her. Okay, so the Australian had learned that the recent quote from Othman says, "The continued search for extraterrestrial communication sustains the hope that someday humankind will receive signals from extraterrestrials. When we do, we should have in place a coordinated response that takes into account all the sensitivities related to the subject. The UN is a ready-made mechanism for such coordination." Imagine that. So they attempted to get Othman to join and become this alien ambassador, but she passed up on it, and instead is going to show up for the meeting, which has to do with everything to do with contact with extraterrestrials. But she says, no, I'm there to talk about near-Earth objects. So we're watching this unfold, and is it too obvious? Is this too simple, where we watch it unfold, where we see it go from the Red Scare to terrorists to asteroids to aliens? Now, Apophis is back in the news. Discovery Channel is working on making an Apophis documentary about the discovery of Apophis. And at the same time, they have the ET disclosure going on. We find that it seems to be just too simple of a script. For me, it's just too simple. But yet, how can we deny what is going on when we start to see all of the news coming out? We have this recent UN with the nukes and UFOs. We have the Funes coming and talking about baptizing ETs. And then NASA getting on board with their Rothschild. And believe it or not, I had all of these stories open and put to my space. And now, Lynn Forrester de Rothschild, she was actually a major fundraiser for Hillary Clinton, and then was a major backer of John McCain. She comes out and is now set up to be discussing the innovations of space and contact with extraterrestrials. So NASA scientists to speak about extraterrestrial life. Dr. Lynn Rothschild, NASA scientist, will present innovations in space discovery. Is there life out there? That'll be on Wednesday at 7 p.m. at the Living Legends Conference. The lecture is open to many distinguished speakers, and Rothschild is an evolutionary biologist, astrobiologist at NASA Ames Research Center, and a professor at Stanford and Brown University. Now, Stanford and the SRI, they've been popping up again and again in the contacts with extra-dimensional beings, or the what is known as the Ennead, the Nine. And now we have this NASA connection with a Rothschild making her way into the ET conference. So she is one of the scientists who started the shift of emphasis away from just looking for radio signals from intelligent beings. As a biologist, she has led the community of astrobiologists into exploring other questions, like what are the habitat limits of life? Now, we're finding life all over the universe. We're finding it, well, all over the planet, under ice, under miles of ice, deep down in the ocean. We can find that life can exist in nearly any environment. So what is the most acid, hottest temperature, coldest temperature, driest, least oxygen, most pressure that bacterial cells can stand? We find that this goes deep, deep down, and that we can find life in almost every environment. So it was assumed that the cosmos is brimming with civilizations that would be broadcasting radio signals. We, meaning the humans of planet Earth, have been broadcasting radio signals all over the place. I'm hoping ET picks up this show. I hope they're out there listening. So it is now an interdisciplinary science, the goal of learning about the origins of life and what the conditions that promote it. So NASA on the same end as the Vatican's ET conference, which has just come out and are about to release their results, and hopefully we can watch all of this and catch up on all of the things that are being put out and promoted through the Rothschild, UN, Vatican information center, right? Because that's where all of this is coming from. Royal Society, UN, Vatican. And we have to start to wonder why they want to promote this idea of ET. What would it do if ET showed up on the White House lawn? What would your reaction be? We'll be back in a minute. Some people look at this alien image as if we're dealing with the dimensional shift. The question often comes, are the aliens material or extra-dimensional? We have enough evidence to suggest both. We have enough evidence to wonder. We don't know whether aliens exist at all, but we see a lot of evidence to suggest this is the case. As we start to look into the spectrum of life on planet Earth, we find that we have these occult leaders in the UN, in the Vatican, in the White House, that are practicing occult rituals that I can determine to be extraterrestrial in origin. Now, is it possible that these priestcraft, such as the Freemasons, the Jesuits, the Zionists, actually have an extraterrestrial bent to them? Now, we can look clearly at the connections between Masonry and Mormonism and see that Joseph Smith had absolutely adopted the Masonic rites and rituals, even to the point where he disclosed that he had brought the brilliancy back to the Freemasonic rituals, that the true purpose and meaning of these rituals had been lost. And he was contacted by an call it angelic being, Moroni, an ET, an extra-dimensional being, to give him the story of life of planet Earth and give him the proper meanings of the rituals that the Freemasons were performing. When we look to this story and we find that the Mormons themselves have an extraterrestrial creation myth coming from the planet Kolob, where God lives, and bringing this to planet Earth, we have more to this puzzle than we can imagine. Now we have the story of the Ennead, the 9, that are channeled by the elite of the world. And we have the concept of an agenda that seems to be unfolding over millennia. We have tales of extraterrestrials going back to the 14th century and beyond. We have cave paintings of aliens and alien craft. Now, one person, Anthony Kane, is a black American who is a relative of Dr. Martin Luther King. He was a former recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize, just like our president. And he was reported a continuing contactee of a representative of an apparent extraterrestrial hyperdimensional governance authority known as the Council of 12. He delivered a number of specific datelines and predicted developments concerning a dimensional shift which Earth and human consciousness is now undergoing in relationship with the year of 2012. It's believed by Mr. Kane that the dates from December 12th, 2012 to December 21st, 2012 will bring about a split in the dimensional frequencies of planet Earth. That humans with a consciousness anchored in fear will remain in the third dimension, while individuals who are experiencing this consciousness awakening will be putting into another dimension. This is a very similar story. We actually get a similar tale out of the Celestine prophecies and the ideas of synchronicity guiding us to a platform that brings us to another dimension. We have this throughout the tales of our ancient mystics of passing through the veil, going to other dimensions. We have all the ideas of magic, the Enochian magic, contact with angelic beings, extra-dimensional communication. Even Aleister Crowley and his contact with the Was. Now we have Stanley Fulham, and I honestly have not received the full story nor read his 352-page book on the arrival on 1013. Wouldn't that be something? Just a few short days from now, aliens arrive on the lawns of all the capitals of the world. A V scenario coming to life. Now this seems to be coming from channeled information and once again some sort of Ashtar command, if you will. I don't know Stanley's full story, being an ex-NORAD officer, and I listened to some of his UFO stories in his interview, but not being able to read his data or his information to understand why he had predicted 1013, and of course coming out and saying, as I did with my 1013 prediction, that here I'm putting my credibility on the line. And I thought that was somewhat truthful. I felt he was really meaning what he was saying there. Now, my 1013 prediction did come true, as I had predicted the next 9/11 to be on 1013, and it turned out to be the financial collapse. And you can go to freemantv.com and check out 1013 bigger than 9/11, which was the headline in Austin, Texas. If you go and listen to the interview I did with Alex Jones on that, where he had told me don't make any specific predictions, and I said no, I really had come on your show to do that very thing, because I did not do that with my 9/11 prediction. So I went on with Alex Jones, told him about 1013 and how I felt that was the next selected target date. And if you go watch this now on YouTube, that very portion of the interview has no audio. They say this is due to copyright offenses by the music. I went and checked the rest of the interview, and there's music on each one of those episodes. But, of course, you can get the whole interview I did with Alex Jones, or Alex Jones did with me, there on the article, 1013, bigger than 9/11. So wouldn't it be curious if this actually occurred on such a symbolic date, whereas this is also Chris Carter of the X-Files production company title, 1013. I made this. You know the story. Would this be another key attention grabber for Illuminati type dissection? I mean, when I was looking at crop circles and started to realize that I had found every corporate logo that I had deciphered in my corporate logos film in a crop circle, and finding these same sacred geometries, blazing pentagrams, eyes in the pyramid and everything else, you've got to wonder. Are we run by extraterrestrials? Now, it would, to me, make perfect sense that these magi, these priestcraft, would be of extraterrestrial origin. Zechariah Sitchin makes it somewhat clear in his one single sentence that he threw into the 12th planet, saying that King Hiram of Tyre was one that was taken to the land of the gods. Now, King Hiram of Tyre is a major player in the Masonic rituals, because it's King Hiram of Tyre that brings Hiram Abiff, this strange, mysterious man who has the technological know-how to build a temple to house the Ark of the Covenant. And this is the very man that every Mason pretends to be when he goes through the rituals of Freemasonry. But what are we finding in these rites and rituals as we find this priestcraft, like the Freemasons and the Jesuits, performing rites and rituals that seem to put them in contact with otherworldly beings, or opening themselves up to possession? I've witnessed the soulless look in many Masons through numerous rituals. Perhaps it's the boredom. I don't know. I haven't performed the rituals myself. I've studied them hard. I understand them, or at least their actions. But without actually participating, it's kind of like trying to describe to somebody what it would be like to take psychedelics. You can't really do it. But here now we have a man, Anthony Kane, saying that this consciousness shift is coming. Meanwhile, we have Stanley Fulham coming forward saying that arrival is imminent next week, and people are wondering what's going to happen tomorrow for 10/10. That's all. You're listening to the Free Zone on Oracle Broadcasting. We are starting the Matrix News Network, and I'm really excited about this. We're going to take it to a whole new level. We're going to push the hard questions. It's going to be Jamie and Freeman as your host. The Matrix News Network, new website to be coming soon with an intro by Sentient Mind on YouTube. It's going to be a group, wonderful effort. We're about to have the studio set up. We're almost there. And I'm really excited. And to start the show with the Matrix News Network, since there is all this ET news going on, I decided to bring on Jim Marrs, who will be a fantastic guest in this light. And also Dr. Michael Salla will return from exopolitics.com. And we are going to explore this extraterrestrial agenda, the alien agenda, as Jim Marrs' book calls it, and see what we think about all of this. Because it's such a strange time to be alive, and so many of us that have been in this UFO information, as I have for our entire existence. You know, Time Warner was pumping it out to us. We were getting it in our Hollywood features. We are the extraterrestrial generation. There's no doubt about it. It's been fed to us, and I've eaten it up, and many of us have. And so as each time we seem and expect some sort of disclosure, we are always somewhat disappointed. My first major disappointment was, of course, when old Governor Fife came out, and I thought, here it is. You know, here's the government official coming to tell us about ETs hovering over Phoenix, Arizona. And no, you know, he brings his grade out, his aide dressed as a gray alien, and laughs at everyone about it. And each time as I waited, but yet at the same time would see on CNN or the national press conference like what just happened, and they have the full disclosure, and I'm sitting there as a child just eating it up going, oh my God, you know, they're telling us about bases on the dark side of the moon. They're telling us about craft that are beyond comprehension. They're splitting into two parts. They're sucking up jets. They're bringing in all kinds of just crazy ideas and thoughts in my head. And each time all of us are left wanting, left hoping that there's going to be some sort of social consciousness change in this extraterrestrial world. We're all hoping that the world's all of a sudden going to wake up to a new reality, and the humdrum existence that we're being pushed into would somehow collapse and disperse, and we could live in an exciting world that has potential, even the potential of living forever and traveling the stars. But this doesn't happen. The information drips out. It does. They release this over and over again until it's boredom, until humanity is looking at it. In Mexico, there's another UFO. There's no more excitement about it. Governments are releasing all their UFO documents left and right on the internet. And where does it really get us? I mean, I don't know that I've ever read a similar description of a UFO. In all of the UFO research I've done, the craft are just multitude. So many variations, so many thoughts and insights. And then we look at every video footage of it, of these different craft, and you can see hundreds, if not thousands, of UFOs. I have a bunch in that Obama alien invasion video I put on YouTube, which is on autoplay right now for the front page. Craft that can't be described, craft that can't be explained. If you tried to describe some of those ones that I showed, well, the ones that I show right at the beginning with Obama talking look to me to be the closest thing to what I saw with the V-shaped craft in Utah. Now, in reviewing the disclosure conference from Stephen Greer, they mentioned that Area 51 had actually been moved to Utah. So I thought, oh, well, you know, there's my answer, because I certainly did not feel that was an otherworldly craft. And it was identical in description from the craft that they saw in Phoenix, Arizona. Now, one thing that was very curious for me was when I'm filming this craft, and of course none of it came out on film, I'm looking very hard at it, but I'm trying to see now. What we saw was a hourglass-shaped light, orange light, in the apex of the V, and then 4 what appear to be like plasma balls holding up the V shape. And after we witnessed this, and I started reviewing it with my friends, which I filmed their attempt to discuss this craft that had just flown over. I figured if I couldn't get the craft on film, I'd at least get the reaction on film. And my friend's reaction was so curious to me because they immediately went into debate mode. They immediately tried to explain what they had seen as if they had someone in the car that was challenging them, as if all 3 of us didn't just witness the same thing. But in witnessing the same thing, we all had different descriptions. I was trying to tell him, most of us decided that there was actually a craft above the orbs. But what appeared to us was just 4 orbs with an orangish hour-shaped glass orb in front. But they had moved so uniformly that we were certain this craft was there, but we couldn't see it. But then once we were done and we started to discuss it, my friend says, well, did you see the little twirly things that were following behind it? And I said, no. And I didn't really believe him when he was telling me about this, because I thought I would have seen it. But I was concentrating on my camera quite a bit, trying to figure out why it's not showing up. The camera's not much good in the dark. But when I listened again to the Phoenix, Arizona descriptions of the craft, they discussed these little twirly craft or orbs that were following in the wake of this V-shaped craft that they saw hovering over their city. When you see what they show in the film clip of the Phoenix or Arizona lights, Phoenix lights, that's not the same thing as the craft. It just isn't the same unless it comes out different in photography. I don't know. So we have this Area 51 right there in Utah, and where is that but Mormonville, right? Right where Joseph Smith went to set up his extraterrestrial cult and bring about the occult nature of the extraterrestrial connections. Battlestar Galactica is the Mormon creation myth. That is the Mormon story. There's so much to this story. I wonder if we'll be able to cover it all tonight. There'll be more free zones. Maybe we found that rocket propulsion is not the way to travel the universe. Maybe it's a little more esoteric and anti-material than we originally thought. So we're looking forward to the STS-134, the Shuttle Endeavour. It's getting ready to send up the AMS, or the Alpha Magnetic Spectrometer. It'll be the 133rd flight of NASA. But now, this also being the last of the space shuttle missions, unless Atlantis rises again, which they have threatened. Well, what's being described as one of the most complex space scientific instruments ever built is on its way to the International Space Station to seek out the dark universe. So perhaps as the television came into creation through their esoteric attempts at making the other unseen seen, you know, the television, the cathode ray tube, actually came through occult experiments to try and contact the other side and make it visible. Now we seek the anti-universe, or the dark universe. This $2 billion alpha magnetic spectrometer coming from CERN arrived at the Kennedy Space Center and will fly on this space shuttle next February. The Alpha Magnetic Spectrometer, the AMS-2, is aimed at learning more about the origin and structure of the universe by observing antimatter and dark matter. It may even detect an anti-universe made of antimatter. With a magnetic field 4,000 times stronger than that of Earth's, the particle detector will directly examine each particle passing through it in a program designed to complement that of the Large Hadron Collider, ATLAS. It will also gather information from cosmic radiation sources on stars and galaxies millions of light years away. The ISIS is the only place where it can be installed due to stability reasons and long-term exposure. But it's expected, the alpha magnetic spectrometer is expected to remain active for the entire lifetime of the International Space Station and will not return to Earth. Now, there's been much seeking of dark matter. The other was the RHIC, the RIC experiment, going in with their Phoenix and Star, colliding gold particles together, and they being the first to announce that they had found this dark matter on Earth. What is going on with all of these? When we start to look to extraterrestrial combative forces, and now the U.S. Air Force has just announced their space readiness, getting ready for their Space Force, beyond having craft to attack and fight extraterrestrial invasion. We might just use something like HAARP. We'll get into this and lots more. You're listening to The Free Zone. So is this fear of ET just really a method of weaponizing space? Get people on board. Well, it hasn't been ETs of late. It's been asteroids, of course, or near-Earth objects, as our new UN ambassador to the aliens wants to discuss. We just launched the first space-based space surveillance system, the SBSS, launching last Sunday. And this SBSS actually is reported by the first Air Force asset dedicated to the purpose of observing satellites or debris in space. So this was launched by a Minotaur rocket out of Vandenberg Air Force Base, and this is the same place where they attempted to launch the hypersonic test vehicle, which seemed to be a major fail, and that was the same day that they were launching NASA's X-37B, or what's known as the Flying Twinkie, a secretive space shuttle that's orbiting our planet as we speak. And now they've got the SBSS up there, and they're getting ready for Air Force Space Command's first Space Operations Squadron to interface with this satellite. So as we start to see our space war building and our Space Force building, the announcement of the United States Air Force Space launches into production phase. Air Force space launch activity is in the midst of an unprecedented ramp-up as it enters a new production era, says Lieutenant General Tom Sheridan. And he's the commander of Space and Missile Systems Center at Los Angeles Air Force Base. So they've introduced 5 new systems over a span of 12 to 18 months, a new era at their facilities. And so as we launched the SBSS, the space-based satellite, we've got the Asteroid Watch, we've got WISE announcing these incoming stars and other bodies out there, near-Earth objects becoming the talk of the town. And meanwhile, NASA's putting up deep waveguide antennas in Australia. Well, I've really got to wonder if some of these technologies aren't for extraterrestrial opposition. Because when you start to look into, as I was saying, with these early UFO crashes in the 40s and 50s, it was all radar-based. And then they found that high-frequency radio frequency waves would also have a devastating effect on these flying craft. So now we have numerous of these devices around the planet, around the globe, even bringing about the Norway spiral. And we have to start to wonder, because these things are capable of sending transmissions all the way to another star system, as they sent the Doritos commercial to Alpha Centauri with the iSCAT antenna array. And just recently, we had the launch of the Atlas V, which was launching up the Air Force's first advanced extremely high-frequency satellite. It was a middle-of-the-night departure, and that went out of Florida. So now we have numerous satellites going up recently with high frequency attack range type frequency satellites. And we have the ground-based systems going up as well, along with the surveillance systems of space-based surveillance. What is going on? Meanwhile, we get all of these ET announcements, the fear of UFOs deterring our nuclear programs. That was all over the news. What would happen? That's always my biggest question, is what would happen? How would people react? Would we stop and think about our lives? Would we stop and wonder why we are doing what we are doing? Would you go to work that day? I wonder a lot of times, because I see people just kind of going about their day, and I District 9, Peter Jackson, you think about how those people are like, those nasty aliens, we got enough people taking our jobs, and continued to think about their real world issues while this craft hung out over the city. Or in the same way with the V series, where they're exchanging people up into the UFOs, and they're offering us all of these advancements in science and medicines. Would aliens come and try and save planet Earth? Not likely. I think any race that's advanced enough to have that kind of empathy would know that we have to save ourselves. Because once you're saved, you're a victim. Once you're saved, you're in the debt. And only through your own actions can you find your way out. And so this is what I think would really be the effect of alien arrival, is people would start to question everything they're doing. But then again, I look around and I see the Matrix, and I just, with all of the amazing things that are going on right now, people should be already questioning their existence and why they go to work every day. Because what we see as the fulfillment of our endeavors, other than the needless supply and demand of commodities, of not commodities, but of trinkets, of things that are unnecessary, what does civilization actually build? Well, it mines a lot of gold, there's no doubt about that. That's generally step A. But it also produces these high technological advancements. Now, as I'm mentioning these $2 billion alpha magnetic spectrometers to find the anti-universe, or the $79 million bombing of the moon, or the multi-trillions going into CERN, what is this all about? And why are we participating and continuing in this agenda? That's always my question that it all comes down to, is our very participation in all of this. So to get to the ET story, really it comes right back home, and we got to realize that if they've been here, they've always been here. If they come, they've always came. And that life on planet Earth is more likely a zoo crafted of extraterrestrial origins. All of our ancient tales tell us this, the ancient tales of the Indians, the Mayans, the North Americans, everywhere you go, you get this extraterrestrial tale. Creation of civilization. Yet civilization doesn't serve humanity one bit, as far as I can tell. And when I look to cities, I find some of the worst examples of human existence that are anywhere on this planet. We're not meant to live like that. The systems in play now are setting up a grid, setting up a world of unimaginable destruction. I mean, they don't know what's going to happen. They did not know what would happen when they set off the hydrogen bomb, the nuclear bomb, the HAARP, CERN, any of these events that they keep just trying and attempting and manipulating could be cataclysmic on planet Earth. And yet we continue to participate. Now, if you can't see the money trail from your job up to the military-industrial complex, then you're missing the whole picture. And I think that's a picture that's hard for many to see. When I start talking to people about rituals on Video Music Awards or the 1010 advertisement of having your head explode for not participating in carbon emission reduction, we'll just kill you. And people say, oh, they're just being funny. But yet you and I, we've been looking at this picture for so long, we see an agenda. We see a mission, a guiding of mankind's mentality towards a certain outcome. And so then we're labeled, of course, the conspiracy theorist, and hardly can even get those around us that do not see that things are done on purpose, that there is absolutely an agenda to all of this extraterrestrial releasing of information in the UN, the Vatican, and everybody else. And there's also an agenda to showing you heads exploding if you don't pay or consign yourself to the idea of global warming. Now, it was certainly hot today. It really shouldn't be as hot as it is here in Lawrence, Kansas on 10/9. Oh, 9, oh, 10. I was thinking of the bombing of the moon. A year already. I mean, really. And this is more than likely due to our position in the universe as opposed to some carbon emissions by humanity. But we see them building our cage, and we're the ones building it. So I don't only want to come out and report the ways that they're building the cage around us. I want to try and inspire you to live differently. Now, there are many ways to say it, non-compliance with the system. That's rather obtuse. That's well, what's the system? What am I not complying? And why did I comply in the first place? So I prefer to trigger things a little harsher, get the whole gauge going. And instead of non-compliance with the system, I would say quit your job, save the world. And I know that this puts a trigger in people's minds. But would you quit your job if aliens showed up on planet Earth? If flying craft were hanging out? Because it's up to us, you and I, to change the course. Now, maybe Mr. Zane was correct in that we will split off. But to me, that seems no accomplishment at all. I have more compassion for all the other humans, even people like George Bush and Dick Cheney, as to wanting to bring them along, I guess. Or even the reptilians or any of the extraterrestrial races. I don't think I want to just be teleported into nirvana without accomplishing some sort of mission here on planet Earth. And I know that this is my one chance. Here I am on the third dimension. Here I am on planet Earth. I can't just sit and go to work. I can't just try and go to college. And when you see what's actually going on, you cannot comply with the system. It just no longer computes. Can't get along with the norms. Can't really function in the system any longer when you know the truth of things, or at least have gotten close to the truth of things. And so it's up to us as we become aware to be the ones to step forward and help those, guide those through the transitional phases. And that would be an accomplishment. That you will feel good and fulfilled from your endeavors. But meanwhile, they're hitting us with all types of frequencies. These HAARP emissions, these antenna arrays, not just the major ones, but even the very cell towers or whatever they are. I don't even believe that thing out in front of the police department is anywhere near a cell tower. That's doing all kinds of stuff. And when I come back to America after Australia, I immediately felt it. I immediately felt all the pains in my body and immediately felt sick and flu-like symptoms, achy joints and all of this from returning into all of these frequencies and gases and everything, the chemtrails and all the madness that we have to deal with. And at times you get angry. At times you feel as if there is no hope, or that you just want to run and hide back into the system, or go and find some nice nook somewhere like Australia and just hide away. But this will not fulfill your soul. And that's really what we want. And so it's in that matter that I always seek you to take some sort of pilgrimage to find life in the universe means so much more to me. Not extraterrestrial life existing out there, but life right here on planet Earth, a fulfillment of your soul that is possible through your synchronistic evaluation of your experience. And you can be brought forth into a beautiful pronoia experience. This is at the heart of almost everything I say, but at the same time, I'm looking at a bizarre agenda that deals with the most amazing things that people aren't referring to or looking at. And when I see things that just bring it back to Satan, say, that just don't mention even the secret society connections, the potential of extra dimensional communication through ritual, then I really feel like we're all really losing out on much of the story that we should be receiving. What if these devices that are going up are more of this type of mind transfer technology, which would really be the same thing we're talking about? Would you not go and then possess another body, take it over, and become that being? Are we setting up a system by perpetuating this military-industrial complex that will then go out and be the vampires of the universe, possessing people's souls? I think people need to look deeper into their weapon systems that we call food, shelter, economy, and realize that you don't need to wait for this ET arrival. You don't need to wait for the big event. And actually, if you do, all the worse, because then you're reactionary instead of actionary. And we can start to step forward. If we really, really take to heart what we're looking at, if you really take to heart that there is extraterrestrial contact with planet Earth, then you must realize that civilization is a waste of time. It's a pointless endeavor that doesn't help anything, and everything could change in a second. I suppose civilization is another one of those trigger words, because when you start to talk about liberty and freedom of all these contraptions, people often come up, well, I like having a jet that will take me from here to there in no time at all. Civilization is not creation. Civilization is basically a clot within the system of life. Society is a different institution. Just society and culture are something that are expressed through humanity's creative efforts. And this would continue. People would continue to dream up jet planes. People would continue to think of new ways of existing, new ways of gaining power structures, new power systems. People are creators. The humans are creators, and we would continue to do so. And if we're looking at doomsday, if there was some major event tomorrow, which I can't imagine what that would be, or if Apophis was hurtling towards planet Earth and there was no escape for any of us, what would you want to do? Would you then go to work? I just wonder, what keeps us in the system? What keeps us just, well, I understand the treadmill that we're on, that we're having to chase the dollar in order to keep our existence. But this is only because we all comply. If we were to practice a bit non-compliance, then, landlords wouldn't have such a foothold. But it would take a movement. It would take everyone. It would take a major collapse just to get people together. And I think that's what it's going to take, because nothing brings people together like a good catastrophe. The Illuminati see the crisis as an opportunity, and we should see it as well. Because if these catastrophes, as the elite seem to be preparing for with their seed vaults and their escape mechanisms and all the things that they seem to be preparing for some sort of doomsday scenario, we could use that as a positive end and be the sole center for the collapse, so that the transition into the new world actually was not one of devastation, but one of sharing, giving, and kindness. Now, they absolutely are playing the religious card, and certainly E.T. showing up on the Washington stairs would be quite a religious event. You can expect that most Christians would think this was Satan. And most Christians think the Catholics are Satan, so whatever they had to say wouldn't help. So they began with the E.T., or perhaps the New Age Maitreya now, the New Age Jesus-type character popping up, and he has been heralded by a star, much as Jesus was. But when you start to look into Maitreya's star and the use of religion to manipulate humanity, you find more manipulation with Maitreya. Because this star seems to me, obviously, the New Light experiment, or at least a similar experiment to the Russians' New Light experiment. So how will this affect our religious? And what can we do to help them? You ever notice that some of the best science fiction TV gets cut off the air? And a couple of my favorites were Defying Gravity and Firefly. Not to mention Farscape. I think they just ran out of money. But when you look at what they might potentially not want us to be thinking about with Defying Gravity and Firefly, is that the high language of their culture is Mandarin, is Chinese. So in the future, we all speak Chinese, but only in the high language. Well, it turns out that NASA's chief, Charles Bolden, is planning to visit China this month for high-level talks about possible cooperation on human spaceflight. And this has prompted senior Republican appropriator to request a security briefing before the trip happens. NASA chief Republican Frank Wolf said he strongly opposes any partnership with Beijing that involves human spaceflight, including efforts to involve China in the International Space Station. I need not remind you that no such planning or coordination has been approved by the Congress. And yet Charles Bolden is set to fly and meet up with China. Wolf goes on to say it should go without saying that NASA has no business cooperating with the Chinese regime on human spaceflight. China is taking an increasingly aggressive posture globally, and their interests rarely intersect with ours. The U.S. intelligence community notes that China's attempts to spy on U.S. agencies are the most aggressive of all foreign intelligence organizations. China's aerospace industry for decades has provided missile technologies and equipment to rogue regimes like Iran and North Korea. They went on to state that this will be an introductory and will not include consideration of specific proposals for human spaceflight cooperation with China. They really could take us over, folks. You know, there's a lot of them. And if they start to gather the technologies that we have, which they are already pushing many space, even attempting to launch their own military space station, maybe these sci-fi stories could become more real than we thought.